Welcome back to What We Don't Know. I'm your host, Xander Schultz. Today we're talking to Reginald Bolding, who is the founder of Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona. It is wild that Arizona is potentially turning blue in 2020. I lived in Arizona in 2007, 2008, and it was about as red as it gets. It had two Republican senators. The Republican presidential candidate was from Arizona. They had a terrible sheriff named Joe Arpaio that was being hailed as a hero at times within the state. And here we are 12 years later. Reginald's work and all the Arizona community organizers' work is really a testament to what can happen when these community organizers have some good energy behind them and the proper funding. And we may end up getting a blue state out of this thing. So it's exciting times in Arizona. I'm super excited to have him here with me and sharing what he has to say with all of you. All right, let's get into it. What's been one of the most, I don't want to just say emotional, but just inspiring emotional moments as you've been doing this work in Arizona?
I work with a team of leaders, and I call them leaders, and they may be young, but they're definitely leaders. And, to have people who, when they first, apply to be a part of, Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona, they kind of read the description of what they'll be doing, but they really don't know until you actually do the work. And to see our team not only become inspired, politically, civically engaged, but the excitement that happens amongst their family. So their families who've never been, civically engaged or voting or participating, they're now, fired up because their child is now working part of a movement. And, the generations, like once you activate somebody once, you activate their family for a lifetime as well. So that activation across generations and homes through the employment of someone is just foundational and it's monumental.
There's a lot of ways to invest in politics, right? And I feel like what you're touching on is the most powerful argument for community organizers. Is there's of course all the down ballot implications, all the benefits of having a larger organized group in each one of these cities, that can work together and pass legislation. But what you're talking about is also this very intimate experience with politics that doesn't happen. Those opportunities aren't usually there unless we fund these community organizers effectively. That's really cool to hear that implication. It's an argument. I haven't made the employment version of that argument before, but that's really, really compelling. Are most of the folks you're hiring, have they been involved in politics before, or it's a lot of young folks that haven't been involved before and haven't been activated?
I would say, 70 to 80% of the people who we hire, they haven't really been involved in politics. I even think about myself in general. While leading a power building organization and one job and the other job, I serve as a member of our state legislature here. And I had no idea that the state legislature even existed as a child growing up. I just thought it was, United States Congress. That's right. It. I thought, House, Senate, President, that's it. I didn't even know that layer of government existed.
Apparently, a lot of Democrats thought that way because we lost every state House and Senate over the last 10 years. So you weren't alone.
That is true. So I find that often with my kids too. I mean, a lot of them, they just don't know. I call them my kids, although they're young adults who are really fired up and motivated. And once they understand the impact that all layers of government have directly on their life, they become, incredibly engaged in making sure that, they're going to participate in who's going to be speaking on behalf of them at the highest levels of government and will no longer idly stand back and just, be complicit and complacent while, things and democracy don't operate the way they should be.
Before we get too deep into this, I want to make sure we're sharing your organization with folks, the overview of Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona. If you had to describe the organization in a couple minutes, how would you describe it?
Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona is a community power building organization that's Black led with an incredibly multiracial team that really is primarily focused on making sure that our community has a seat at the table and they can actually flex their muscle while they're sitting at the table. So we are engaged in electoral work and making sure that we are fighting to put people in office that represent the values that our communities care about. At the same time, holding people accountable once they are in office to make sure that we can get the policies that we need. Because while we care a lot about the politics of what's happening, the policy impacts are the most important piece for our community as it has long-lasting impact.
And so you're also in the House of Representatives, the State House of Representatives in Arizona. Which came first? Did you have the organizing group, then the position, or vice versa?
So I served in the state legislature first, but my entry into the movement actually began. I began in the movement unconventional way as a teacher. I was a special education teacher in South Phoenix, and for me, seeing my students walking to school in the streets because there was no sidewalks developed, or revolving door of substitute teachers, or as a teacher having to Xerox copy textbooks because we didn't have enough. I just felt like there was more to be done, more that needed to. So I joined a group of other teachers and community organizers, and we created a group called the Rise of South Phoenix to really rise up and say that there's issues, there's things that we need to change. Yes, and through that, I eventually, ran for office because people were making decisions about our education system that hadn't been in the classroom for 20 plus years. So I ran as an educator. But one of the biggest things that really impacts that I think about is the impact of power. And when I think about power, I think about organized people, organized money, and then a position to make a change. So while I was in the position, to actually cast the vote and make the change, getting organized people and organized money was something that needed to be created. And that really eventually drew me to, starting Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona.
I just got off the phone with Pastor Mike McBride from the Black Church PAC, and he was talking about the natural organizing force that is the Black Church network. Is education similar? When you were coming out of education, you're like, oh, there are these other teachers. Were you able to meet with other schools? Was there a syndicate, like an untapped syndicate you were able to tap into?
There was a group of what I would call sort of social justice educators who understood that what's happening in our communities, in our classrooms, should not be the reality. Like simply driving 2 miles down the street, you see an entire different, reality for kids. And we just, it just was unacceptable. My students had all of the knowledge and skills that they needed, but none of them had access and opportunity. And that's really the fine line, between, the knowledge and skills. We know so many people who know so much, but they just have never been given access and opportunity to put it into play. And, we said, okay, we're not going to allow that to happen. So let's grind. Let's grind.
I imagine. So I went to a public high school that had a lot of issues. I ended up being a high school dropout. And teachers are asked to do a lot in those environments. And you're kind of like, you have to play all these different roles a lot of times for, young people that don't have these other people filling these gaps, and there's just not social programs for them. Right. So I imagine in a lot of ways, that's an education in public policy, just trying to serve kids from a community like that in terms of food programs, mentorship programs, after school program, all these things that, we now know are required to build healthy individuals. And so I imagine that process, you're like, okay, this is a role. I cannot solve all this from right here. Was that kind of your thinking as you were staring at all these problems?
No, absolutely. And one of the largest components was making sure that we had, talent and investment. And from a talent standpoint, making sure that we're able to attract people who, truly care about our students and our communities. And then also the investment, we need the resources. So like Our Voice, Our Vote, we run things called override and bond initiatives. So these are taxing measures that are put on the ballot for local school districts. So this past year, we were able to successfully, pass a bond to get $3 million into a local school district so they can use that to invest in transportation and, Chromebooks and things of that nature. And when we first got started, we ran the largest high school district override and bond election in Arizona, which is the Phoenix Union High School District. And we were able to garner $298 million for that school district to actually transform the programs that students could actually participate in.
That's wonderful. What was as you were transitioning, right, from teacher to public service, what was something you saw as a teacher? You're like, that's going to be one of the first things I solve. I can't believe how many people are dealing with that. And it's just a dumb problem. We can fix that.
It's actually the correlation between being a teacher and being in public services. I mean, they so directly intertwine. It's amazing. If you ever taught a classroom, just imagine having 30 students looking up at you as you're standing in front of the classroom. You have to be ready. If you're not ready, then it's an issue. And that's the same thing on the House floor. You pick up the microphone and you're advocating for an issue. You got folks looking at you, and you got to be ready. So there's a lot of intersections there, but the biggest impact is just the value of public policy making. Many people don't believe that they have the ability to actually craft legislation or advocate for legislation. An elected official seems so out of reach to the everyday person that I couldn't. People would say, I didn't know I could pick up the phone and call you, or I didn't know that I can talk to you about an issue that matters, and because it could seem so foreign to the public to be able to reach out to your congressman or your United States senator's office to say, like, what you're doing, I agree with, or I don't agree with, or even to say, I think this should be a law. So for me, I wanted people to see that everyday people could actually be in positions of power. And when they're there, you could also, change the dynamics of what that policy looks like.
Right. So it wasn't so much, I'm going to go get this one issue. It's like, I'm going to let folks know that we can be participants in this broadly. Like that's what's most important to me.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, we have so many different complex issues ranging from criminal justice to environment to healthcare to banking and so housing. There's so many issues, but if you understand how democracy works, you're not a one issue person. You could participate in things that's going to create a healthy community.
So when we launched Defeat by Tweet, we said we were going to fund Black-led swing state organizers. And a lot of folks were not anticipating Arizona being on that list of swing states. It's kind of like I lived in Tucson for 2 years when McCain was running against Obama, and like Arizona was Republican HQ. It's pretty incredible seeing as a swing state. I know it's polling pretty close right now. I think even polling ahead for Biden at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, which is wild. And that's a testament to the work of yourself and organizations like yours. What has been most effective in that movement? Is it just getting people online? Is it talking to a specific issue? What do you think has been effective in closing that gap?
The biggest thing that really has fired people up in the state is actually, seeing victories. And that's important. When you're in the fight and you're in the grind and you are getting beat up, it's hard to see sort of that light at the end of the tunnel. But what we've been able to do is see victories ever since SB 1070 and the Show Me Your Papers law. You've seen groups of organizing, not only in the Latino community, but other communities really coming together to say, like, wait, we can actually, if we work together, we can change the dynamic of what's happening in Arizona. And you've seen, our LGBTQ community stand up on and say, like, we don't want these non-discrimination policies. And then you also seen in 2016, it was an effort to raise the minimum wage in Arizona, to move it from at what was $8.05 to at least $12 by 2020. And we worked like crazy and we won. And what we've seen is a 14% increase in individuals' take-home wages since, we passed Proposition 206. And then we came back in 2018 and we changed the dynamic of the legislature. This is the closest the legislature has been since 1966. There's 31 Republicans, 29 Democrats. in the House, and then there's 17 Republicans and 13 Democrats in the Senate. And we picked up the first United States Democratic woman senator in Arizona history. So, we've been seeing momentum, and people have said that way. When I get involved, things change, because to go along with those years, we've also seen higher participation than ever before. And that message is translating.
Right. It's what Facebook aspires for. You need that dopamine hit. You need to do something and
You,
then
you,
get
need-
rewarded
you need
for
it.
it.
You need it. Yeah, exactly.
And so it started with, it sounded like, with your story, some of it started with this law they put in place where you could basically frisk people for their immigration documents, right? Or if they were citizens or not. And there started to be a strong pushback.
It was so bad that the law said, like, if you looked like you were here illegally, they could stop you. Like right. what does that look like, right?
That's beyond a dog whistle. That's just like a regular whistle at that point of some a wild piece of legislation. And you all are, on top of being HQ for the Republican Party with McCain and everything, you also had like the world's most famous terrible sheriff over there with Joe. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Arpaio.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Joe Arpaio.
Yeah. And one of the most wild versions of our justice system, with everyone being outdoors in 100-something degree heat, wearing, pink outfits. I remember, that was one of his big, what he was known for. Can you talk about where justice reform is at in Arizona right now? What's happened since kind of that Joe Arpaio peak?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it sort of correlates along the line of SB 1070 with the Show Me Your Papers law. Is that the actual sponsor of that law happens to be the Senate president, and what we did is we organized, and we were successful in the first recall election in Arizona to recall the Senate president. So the one who sponsored the legislation, we got him kicked out of office, and then in 2016. With Joe Arpaio, what we saw is that he has just had, inhumane conditions that people were living in, openly racist, proudly.
That's his calling
in 2016, right? In 2016, we were able to defeat him and kick him out of office. And right now, what we're seeing from a social justice standpoint, racial justice, criminal justice standpoint, is that when we collectively identify specific targets, whether it's policy or people, that we can be successful. Right now in Arizona, there's a few things that we're tackling right now that we know can be fundamental within the state. So we have a use of force law, and it's ARS 13-10. I'm going to get real nerdy for a second, and this is the deadly force justification for law enforcement officers. So right now in our state statute, it allows for officers to use deadly force if they reasonably believe that you have committed a serious crime. So they don't have to be in imminent danger of their life. If they reasonably believe that you've committed a serious crime and that you may commit another one, they can use deadly force. If you're trying to escape, so it's called the fleeing felon statute. If you're trying to escape after committing a crime, it's legal to actually use deadly force. So we have to change that use of force justification. And that's why a lot of officer-involved shootings you see, they don't end up in criminalized, because the definition for use of force is so broad, you can get away with anything.
How do you prove that they didn't think you might have committed a serious crime? Like it's so loose, that definition, you can never prosecute, I assume.
You can never prosecute it. So for us, we want to craft it to say, like, you have to be in imminent fear of your life, right? That's it's literally life or death situation in order for you to use deadly force. Anything outside of that, you shouldn't be using deadly force.
I imagine too, you all aren't making that up from scratch. I imagine that's the legislation in a lot of other states, that Arizona's far. Is there anyone that has that same language that Arizona has, or is it unique to Arizona?
No, so the fleeing felon definition of use of force is predominantly across this country. I mean, that
Wow.
is one of the single most important reasons why, you have law enforcement officers who aren't charged, because their use of force statutes are so broad. But states like Colorado that have been able to change what their legislative makeup looks like. They just passed landmark police reform legislation, so they've been able to change their use of force definition along with some other states. But we have to do that in order to make sure that we're creating a more just and equitable experience.
You've mentioned a lot of different victories in the state over this last cycle, this last 2-year cycle. What makes you smile the most? Whether it's a victory or just some outcome, what makes you smile the most when you think about your work?
I remember so I'm originally from Ohio, and I moved here, and it was sort of in so people would refer to Arizona as the epicenter of hate, right? And now, 10 years later, we're a battleground state, right? So from the epicenter of hate to a battleground state, right. It's just like phenomenal when you think about what that means. And people would always say, you can't spell crazy without AZ, right? We're like, wait, no, that's not the message that we want to have about Arizona. But the thing that makes me smile is that now, like, we are 100% confident that we will help determine the outcome of the United States election. Like, we truly believe Arizona will be, the 11 electoral votes will go to Biden. We believe that a United States senator will have 2 Democratic United States senators in Arizona. And we know for sure that we will flip at least one chamber of our state legislature, which would have been unthinkable, unimaginable. So, like, just stepping back and thinking about, we've been dreaming about what an Arizona could look like if we were in power. But now to literally be hopefully 19 days away, or more, or 19 days or less, right? It's huge.
It's pretty wild. Yeah. Thinking about Arizona as like just this flip. And I don't think it's caught up to the cultural zeitgeist. Like, people don't understand what's happening in Arizona quite yet and what's happened.
Yeah.
Have other community organizers from other states come to you guys and, like, ask what the hell happened here? Like, how'd you all do this? And if that is true, what is, like, your best advice to those folks?
It's been a combination of us watching some states that have been a couple years ahead of us,
right.
And then also some states that have been there for a while. So, to have some of the organizers from, California come out here and show us the work that they're doing, or, looking at some of, like, the strong tactics that are happening in the South from some Black-led organizations that have been
right. Georgia's a good example.
Exactly. So it's been a little bit of, taking some of the best tricks of the trade and then and amplifying that to our context. But then those states that are moving forward, that are really close to where we're at Arizona, just really trying to really talk about the importance of that long-term relational year-round organizing that has to happen. Because the reality is, elections are tactics that are then used to create change. So
right.
An election in and of itself will not create the change that we want. We know that it's going to take that year-round organizing in order to make the change that we care about.
So one of the things we're going to do over the next month at Defeat by Tweet, we have 37,000 monthly donors right now. And
wow.
The conversation we're going to have with them is, the incredible folks who have really, all our donations are 501c4, Black-led 501c4s, which, as you know, hard money to raise. And these folks are all stepping up, throwing $9, $18, $30 a month in there. It's pretty incredible. And so the conversation we're having now, and it's through these conversations, is, racial justice hasn't been resolved just because Trump's out there. He's not just a bad politician, he's also the face of white nationalism. Let's continue to combat, this neo rise he's trying to catalyze. And so when you think about, what excites me is if we're able to keep this thing going and get that in between election cycle money for community organizers, and maybe it goes on 4, 8, 10 years. When you think about a well-funded Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona for 10 years and all these reforms that when you talk about, hey, we're about to win this state house, we might have 2, Democratic senators, et cetera. What upcoming victories excite you the most?
I think the biggest one is in 2022, an opportunity for us to have a Democratic governor. That is foundational in change making, especially when we want to make policies that can directly impact our lives in so many different issues, especially, on the criminal justice front itself, is that, while we will have, a chamber of the legislature, we still need the governor's signature. So, to be able to change, who's in the governor's, office is foundational. And I think like that is one of the most impactful races that we're focused on and that we know will make a huge difference.
Super exciting. You're the second person to tell me, a lot of people bring up sheriff, DA races, and you're the second person in as many days to say, hey, we need to start winning these executive races as well. We need to start winning mayoral and governor races as well. That's really exciting to think about for sure. I don't want to hold you up too much. It's October 2020, so we've got a few things going on this month. I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing. It's an honor to support you all. And please let me know if you ever need anything. We're all here for you and rooting for you.
Definitely, I appreciate it. And thank you for the support. It's really, leaders in a movement that say that there's a problem, there's an issue, and I'm going to step in and help create change. And I see you as that, to, for so many organizations like ours. So I really appreciate you, for you and your vision.
Thank you, brother. Before we go, also, I just want to, I've forgotten to do this a couple of times, just also give you the floor. If there's something, that I didn't ask, we didn't naturally get to, but you think it's important to get on the record for, like, have at it.
Right now there's so many things happening in our state, in our country, from COVID to what we see with regards to racial injustice, that it's important for us to really think about how do we create a movement from the moments that we're currently in, and the reality is COVID and racial injustice. These are just inflection points, and these are sort of the apex of what we've already seen. We've seen disparities in healthcare amongst communities of color. We've seen, discrimination taking place from our schools to our criminal justice system. So this has just amplified those issues. And my hope is that we can use, these moments to really talk about true impactful change. And I truly believe that when we look back, we can say that 2020 was an opportunity for us to really change direction for our country.
100%. I've been telling friends, like, acute pain is better than dull pain. Even though it hurts more in the moment, you address it, right? If your hand's on the stove, you pull it off, and you dress your hand in gauze and whatnot. Versus, like, I don't know, as I don't know whatever the equivalent of a dull pain would be, right? An infection or something that you eventually lose your leg because you didn't address it. And so I think in a lot of ways, the story's definitely not over right now. In a lot of ways, there's a version of this Trump election, COVID, the George Floyd killing, all these things that are unfortunate and have had terrible implications in the near term that make us more reactive in sustained ways. I feel like so many of the conversations I hear everyday people having are very mature conversations. Like Belgium is taking down statues of King Leopold. Like, we're talking, it's not just like policing, like we're talking about the effects of colonialism, the slave trade, like really, really mature conversations around the legacy of history and viewing history as that's much shorter than maybe we viewed it in the past, and how this deeper understanding of how these things go from one iteration, oppression goes from one iteration to another. And we need to probably get a little bit uncomfortable, or a lot of people need to get a little bit uncomfortable on how dramatically we need to change to address those things.
No, absolutely. Well said. Well said.
All right, brother. You have a wonderful day, man. Thank you so much for taking the time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care. Thank you for listening to What We Don't Know. If you're looking for more content like this, you can head over and be a supporter on our Patreon, patreon.com/WWDK. You can also follow us on social. We're WWDK Pod on Twitter and Instagram. I hope this finds you happy, healthy, and safe. All right, take care.